There are moments in life when we are brought face to face with the truth about ourselves. Not the image we show the world, not the armor we wear every day, but the truth that lies deep within. In those moments we realize that it is not our power, our reputation, or even our past that defines who we are. It is the love of God that can reach into the darkest corners of our hearts and call us to redemption. This is the story of a man who seemed beyond saving, a man whose hands were stained with the blood of the innocent, a Roman centurion named Longinus. To many he was a figure of authority, a man of discipline and iron will, a symbol of the mighty Roman Empire. But inside he was a man lost in the routines of violence and the emptiness of power. His life was one of orders and obedience, until one day, one moment, everything changed. As he stood at the foot of the cross on that dark day outside Jerusalem, Longinus saw something he could not explain. He saw a man, beaten and bloodied, hanging on the cross. Not cursing, not resisting, but praying for the forgiveness of his executioners. He heard words of love and mercy that defied reason, that broke through the hardness of his heart. And in that moment, he realized that the man on the cross was not just another condemned rebel, he was the Son of God. This story isn't just about Longinus, it's about all of us. It's about how no one is too far gone, no sin too great, no heart too cold for the love of God to break through. It's about the truth that it's not our past that defines us, but His love that redeems us. It's a story that whispers to every heart, you are not forgotten. You are not beyond grace. You are loved beyond measure. So, as you listen today, let your heart be open. Let the story of a soldier turned saint remind you that grace is for everyone. If this story touches your heart, please consider subscribing to Sacred Wisdom and liking this video. Your support not only helps us spread powerful messages of faith and the Bible, but also joins us in planting seeds of hope around the world. We are truly grateful for you. In the eyes of Rome, Longinus was everything a centurion should be. Tall, broad-shouldered, his face hardened like the shields he carried, he embodied the strength of the empire. His armor shone beneath the sun as he led a century of 100 disciplined soldiers. Each morning, his voice rang sharp over the training grounds, barking orders, drilling obedience, forging men into weapons of war. In a world where loyalty was measured by the number of enemies slain and the precision of a blade, Longinus was a man who stood out. His life was one of order. Orders given, orders obeyed, orders carried out without question. His superiors trusted him because he delivered results. Rebellious provinces subdued, criminals executed, peace maintained through fear. Behind his commanding presence was a reputation for efficiency and ruthlessness. To his soldiers, he was a commander to be feared and respected. To his superiors, a loyal instrument of imperial power. He knew how to break a man's spirit with a word, how to lead a charge with unflinching precision. His life was a series of battles, each one leaving a mark etched deeper into his soul. But beneath the iron facade, Longinus carried a wariness no sword could cut through. Years of war had carved deep lines into his face, but it was the silent weight of his deeds that aged him from within. He had seen death more times than he cared to count, on the battlefield, in the streets of Jerusalem, at the crosses of Golgotha. He had witnessed eyes pleading for mercy, heard the final cries of men broken under Roman whips, watched as families were torn apart, and with each order carried out, a small piece of his soul seemed to fade into the void. At night, when the clamor of duty quieted, Longinus would lie awake in his quarters, staring at the ceiling of stone. His thoughts wandered to the faces of those he had condemned, the silent questions that haunted him. Was this all there was to life? Obedience to an empire that demanded blood? The restless ache within him whispered of a longing for something he could not name. He was a man trapped in the role of a soldier, chained by duty yet unknowingly yearning for release. Despite his outward strength, Longinus was a man hollowed by the weight of power. He had conquered cities, but he had not conquered the emptiness in his heart. He was a man built of stone, yet deep within cracks were beginning to form. His life was a relentless march through darkness, a life where violence was survival, and victory was marked by the silence of the fallen. In the hushed moments before dawn, as the world still slumbered, he would sometimes stand alone, staring into the distance. There, with the rising sun casting long shadows over the earth, he would feel a fleeting sense of unease, a whisper that there was more to life than conquest, more than fear and control. But these thoughts he buried deep beneath the layers of discipline, refusing to acknowledge them. He told himself it was weakness, that a soldier's heart must be steel. This was the man who would one day stand at the foot of the cross, a man whose story had been written by swords and shields, but who would soon be rewritten by grace. But Longinus's world of cold obedience would soon be shaken. A man named Jesus was arrested, dragged through a night of betrayal and injustice. Now, let's witness how the trial of this man began to crack the centurion's unshakable exterior. The night was thick with shadows when the soldiers arrived at the quiet garden called Gethsemane. Among them walked a man who had once been counted among Jesus' closest friends, Judas Iscariot. His steps were quick, his eyes darting nervously, and in his hand he carried the sign of betrayal, a kiss. It was with that simple act that the Son of God was handed over, not with swords drawn, but with the sting of a friend's betrayal. Jesus, calm and composed, did not resist. Even as Peter, driven by desperation, drew his sword and struck, Jesus commanded peace, healing the wounded servant's ear with a touch of compassion that defied the chaos. The soldiers, bewildered, seized him nonetheless, binding his hands as if he were a common criminal. Longinus, though not present in the garden, heard the reports later from his men. It was the beginning of something he could not yet understand. The trial that followed was a display of injustice clothed in legal robes. Brought before Caiaphas, the high priest, Jesus stood silent amid a flurry of accusations. Witnesses contradicted each other, falsehoods piled upon lies, yet Jesus did not defend himself. His silence was louder than any protest, a quiet strength that unsettled even the most hardened hearts. Longinus heard of this too, how the prisoner refused to plead for his life, how he seemed to carry himself with a dignity that no chain could bind. Then came the trial before Pontius Pilate. The governor was a man accustomed to wielding authority, yet in Jesus he found a mystery he could not unravel. "Are you the king of the Jews?" Pilate asked, hoping for a denial, a defense, something. But Jesus answered simply, "You have said so." When pressed with more accusations, he remained silent. Pilate, accustomed to criminals pleading, bargaining, even groveling for mercy, found himself staring into the calm eyes of a man whose spirit could not be broken. The crowd outside grew louder, whipped into a frenzy by the religious leaders. They cried for Barabbas, a notorious criminal, to be released. When Pilate, in one last effort, asked what he should do with Jesus, the shouts of "Crucify him!" echoed through the courtyard like a storm. Longinus, standing apart, listened to the uproar. Though he didn't fully grasp the gravity of the moment, he sensed that the man at the center of this turmoil was unlike any prisoner he had ever seen. As Pilate washed his hands in symbolic protest, surrendering Jesus to be crucified, Longinus found himself watching the unfolding drama with a mixture of detachment and curiosity. He didn't yet know that this quiet, suffering man would soon change his life forever. As the sentence was passed and the cross was prepared, Longinus was drawn into the heart of the crucifixion. Let's walk with him to Golgotha, where violence and mercy would collide, and the eyes of a soldier would be forever opened. The sun hung heavy in the sky, shrouded in a veil of clouds, as if heaven itself refused to witness what was unfolding. Longinus stood at his post, his eyes fixed on the wooden cross now lying on the ground. The condemned man, Jesus of Nazareth, lay atop it, arms stretched wide, silent, as nails were driven through his hands and feet. The sound of the hammer striking iron echoed like thunder through the dry, dusty air. Around them the crowd surged forward, shouting and jeering, their voices sharp with cruelty and derision. Longinus had seen many crucifixions in his time, each one brutal, each one a spectacle meant to display Rome's iron-fisted rule. But this was different. As the soldiers worked, driving nails into flesh, Jesus made no sound of protest. He did not scream, did not curse. Instead, his face, though twisted in pain, held a look of profound sorrow, not for himself, but for those around him. It was as though he bore not just the physical agony of crucifixion, but the weight of every soul present. The cross was hoisted upright with a shuddering thud, the wooden beam sinking into its socket with a jarring finality. Jesus' body jerked with the impact, his arms stretched taut, his chest heaving. Blood flowed from his wounds, painting the wood a deep crimson. The sun's light caught the trickle of blood and sweat on his brow, glinting like a crown of rubies beneath the mock crown of thorns. Longinus could not look away. Around him, the crowd continued to mock. Some shouted for him to come down if he truly was the Son of God. Others hurled insults, laughing at his suffering. Yet in the midst of the noise and chaos, Jesus spoke. Not words of condemnation, but words of forgiveness. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." The words hung in the air like a fragile thread of light piercing the storm. Longinus felt a strange tightening in his chest, a flicker of something he could not name. Beside Jesus, two thieves hung in agony. One cursed, demanding salvation, while the other, his voice weak and trembling, whispered, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." To this, Jesus replied with a promise that would echo through eternity. "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." The words were not just for the thief, but for every soul watching, for Longinus himself. The sky darkened as though creation itself mourned. Shadows stretched long over the ground, the cross's silhouette falling across the centurion's face. The air grew heavy, thick with the sense of impending sorrow. Jesus cried out once more, a voice filled with anguish and love, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Then, with one final breath, he whispered, "It is finished," and bowed his head in death. Longinus felt the earth tremble beneath his feet. The ground split with a low, rumbling growl, and a sudden hush fell over the crowd. Even the mocking voices were stilled, as fear crept into their hearts. Longinus's hands tightened on the spear he carried, its weight suddenly more than mere metal and wood. He stepped forward. His duty required him to confirm the death of the condemned, but something deeper compelled him, something he did not yet understand. With measured steps, he approached the cross. The body of Jesus hung still, lifeless. Without hesitation, Longinus thrust his spear into Jesus' side. From the wound flowed blood and water, mingling and streaming down the wood, splashing onto the dust below. A drop struck Longinus' face, and in that instant, a warmth flooded over him, a clarity he had never known. His eyes, so used to darkness, felt opened, not just to the scene before him, but to something beyond. The blood and water that poured from the Saviour's side seemed to speak to him, washing over the silent ache he had carried for years. For the first time, Longinus felt the weight of his own sins, not as condemnation, but as an invitation to grace. His knees buckled, and he fell to the ground, his spear clattering beside him. He looked up at the lifeless form of Jesus and whispered, his voice breaking, "Truly this man was the Son of God." In that moment, the centurion who had once overseen countless deaths was reborn, not through sword or shield, but through the love that flowed from the heart of the crucified Savior. The cross had fallen silent, but its echo haunted Longinus. Even after the crowds had dispersed, the memory of what he had seen clung to him like a shadow. Let's follow his restless steps in the aftermath of the crucifixion. The days after the crucifixion settled over Jerusalem like a heavy shroud. Longinus could not escape the weight pressing down on his soul. Though he had returned to his duties as a centurion, his heart was no longer the same. The image of Jesus on the cross haunted him. Those quiet eyes, filled with a depth of compassion, even as his body writhed in pain. The echo of his words, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing," reverberated in Longinus's mind, louder than the shouts of any crowd he had ever faced. At night, Longinus lay awake, staring at the stone ceiling above him. The cold silence of his quarters was broken only by the whispering winds outside. But in his mind, he heard the rumble of the earth, the crack of the temple veil tearing, the silence that followed Jesus' final breath. His dreams were filled with vivid images. The cross standing against a darkened sky, the blood and water flowing from the spear wound, the feel of it splashing against his face. He could not shake the sensation of something shifting inside him, something breaking free. The rumors that began to swirl around the city only deepened his unrest. Some whispered that the tomb where Jesus' body had been laid was now empty. Others claimed to have seen him alive, speaking to his followers, offering peace. Longinus listened to these stories with growing unease. Could it be true? Could the man he had pierced with his own spear truly be alive? His heart, once so sure of duty and order, now trembled under the weight of uncertainty. He found himself wandering the streets at night, pausing outside the homes where voices murmured in secret about the resurrection. He longed to hear more, to understand, but fear held him back. He was a centurion, a man of Rome. Could he truly abandon everything he had known? Could he embrace a truth that defied the empire's power? His inner struggle grew with each passing day. The man who had once faced battlefields without flinching now found himself trembling at the thought of a carpenter's empty tomb. In the stillness of night, he whispered words he did not fully understand. Pleas for forgiveness, cries for clarity, for peace. His soul, once hardened like Roman steel, was now fragile, raw, and open to a light he had never known. Longinus had been a soldier, a man of commands and conquests, but now he was a man haunted by grace, walking a path where every step was a question, every breath a prayer. He didn't know where it would lead, but he knew one thing: he could never return to the man he was before the cross. From the whispers of resurrection to the ache in his heart, Longinus's journey led him away from the empire's commands toward the path of grace. Now, let's witness how the centurion laid down his sword to take up a new mission. The weight of what Longinus had witnessed bore down on him like armor he could no longer wear. For days he walked the streets of Jerusalem, a soldier outwardly unchanged, but within a man in turmoil. The rumors of the empty tomb, the whispers of resurrection, and the memory of the blood and water from Christ's side pressed into his heart. He could not return to the man he was before. The spear that had once been an instrument of death had become a symbol of transformation. And Longinus knew his life of conquest and command had come to an end. In a moment of decision, he laid down his sword, unbuckled his armor, and left behind the title of centurion. To those around him, it seemed madness. How could a Roman officer abandon the power and prestige of his position for a crucified man? But for Longinus, it was not madness, it was freedom. He understood now that true power was not in commanding legions, but in surrendering to the love he had seen on the cross. He sought out the disciples, the ones who had followed Jesus in life and now spoke of his resurrection. He approached them not as a soldier, but as a broken man, yearning for truth. They received him cautiously, some with fear, others with wonder. Here stood the man who had pierced their Lord's side, now humbly asking to know more. Longinus listened to their stories, of the miracles, the teachings, the love that Jesus had poured into every life he touched, and in those stories, Longinus found echoes of his own awakening. He asked for baptism, and in those sacred waters, he felt the old man die and a new life begin. The water washed away the bloodstains of his past, and for the first time he felt truly clean. No longer a soldier of Rome, he became a soldier of Christ, carrying not a spear, but the message of salvation. Longinus' story spread quickly through the early Christian community. The centurion who had once led men into battle now stood in the streets, proclaiming the love of the one he had once helped crucify. His words carried the weight of a witness, one who had stood at the foot of the cross and seen both suffering and glory. He spoke not from hearsay but from experience, and his testimony moved hearts. "Once my hands nailed him to the cross," he would say. "Now my hands lift up his name in praise. Once my spear pierced his side, now my words proclaim his love. I was the hand of judgment, but now I am the voice of mercy." He traveled through towns and villages, sharing the story of Golgotha, of the blood that had changed everything. His mission was not one of conquest, but of reconciliation, not of domination, but of redemption. In every place he visited, he invited others to lay down their burdens, to trade fear for faith, violence for peace. Longinus had been the hand that drove the nails, but now he was the voice that told of forgiveness. From soldier to saint, from executioner to evangelist, his life became a living testament to the transforming power of grace. But the road of faith was not without its cost. Longinus, once a soldier of Rome, now stood ready to face persecution for the name of Christ. Let's witness his final act of surrender, where love triumphed over fear. Longinus' transformation from soldier to saint did not go unnoticed. Whispers of his conversion echoed through the streets of Jerusalem and beyond. The Roman authorities, once proud of his loyalty and military prowess, now saw him as a threat. A deserter who had turned his back on the empire and embraced a faith that challenged its very foundation. To abandon the sword was one thing, to publicly proclaim the crucified and risen Christ was another. He was summoned, interrogated, and ordered to recant his new faith. The magistrates, draped in the colors of Roman power, demanded his submission, reminding him of the empire's might and his duty as a citizen. But Longinus, standing before them with a calm far greater than any he had shown on the battlefield, refused to deny the truth he had witnessed. "I have seen the Son of God," he declared, "and I cannot turn away from him." His words sealed his fate. Stripped of his remaining honors and possessions, he was imprisoned and subjected to tortures designed to break both body and spirit. Chains bit into his flesh, whips tore his back, and threats filled his ears. But Longinus, once a commander of men, now drew strength from the same love he had seen poured out on the cross. His prayers became his weapons, his endurance a quiet testimony to the power of grace. On the day of his execution, he was led from his cell to a lonely hill outside the city. The sun, once so brilliant over his marches and victories, now cast a muted glow over his final steps. Longinus knelt upon the earth, his hands lifted not in defense but in surrender. His eyes, once cold with military calculation, now gazed upward with the peace of a man who had found his true king. "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit," he whispered, echoing the words of Jesus with unwavering faith. The executioner raised his sword, and in one swift motion ended the earthly life of the man who had once pierced the side of the Savior. According to ancient tradition, as Longinus' head fell to the ground, it did not bleed red alone. Milk, pure and white, mingled with his blood, a symbol of the cleansing power of faith and the unwavering purity of a soul reborn in grace. Longinus' story does not end with his martyrdom. It lives on, not just as a tale of a Roman soldier's transformation, but as a timeless reminder that no one is ever too far gone for the grace of God to reach them. His journey from the hands that pierced the side of Jesus to a heart washed clean by grace tells us that redemption is not reserved for the righteous. It is a gift for the broken, the weary, the ones who thought they had no place in God's love. Perhaps you too have felt distant, trapped by your past, weighed down by choices that haunt you. But just as Longinus found his way to the foot of the cross, so can you. It is never too late. The same Jesus who forgave those who nailed him to the cross, who loved even those who mocked him, extends his arms to you today. His love is not based on merit, not withheld for the perfect. It is given freely, poured out for anyone willing to receive it. Imagine standing where Longinus once stood, at the foot of a cross, hearing the quiet words of a Savior who says, "Father, forgive them." Imagine the realization that those words are not just for a crowd long past, but for you, right here, right now. No matter how far you have wandered, no matter the burden you carry, the same love that softened a soldier's heart is waiting to embrace yours. So, as we close this story, let it become more than a tale from history. Let it be an invitation to lay down your fears, your failures, your doubts, and to embrace the love that has always been reaching for you. If the crucified Christ can forgive the hand that pierced him, then he can and will forgive you. We truly hope this story has touched your heart. Please consider subscribing to Sacred Wisdom and liking this video. Your support not only helps us share powerful messages of faith in the Bible, but it also helps spread the hope of God's love to those who need it most. We are truly grateful for your support. Thank you.